I've only ever found one time when a biblical author knowingly changed the scripture they were quoting to better fit their point. And that one time is in Hebrews chapter 3. Now, the book of Hebrews opens from the very beginning with a bold statement that the God who spoke through the prophets now speaks through his Son, and does so better. The first chapter is devoted to detailing how Jesus is better than the angels, and the third chapter is devoted to how Jesus is better than Moses, the great lawgiver of the Old Testament. The author of Hebrews draws together the similarities between Jesus and Moses and the positive aspects of what we can expect if we just stay faithful. And to back this point up, the author quotes a passage from Psalms about the people of Israel not staying faithful to what Moses had told them. Now, there are a number of differences here between what the author of Hebrew quotes and what we find in our Old Testament, but most of those differences can be found in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament that the author presumably used as his source. But one difference stands out. The original says that the people had tested God, though they had seen what I did. For 40 years I was angry with that generation. Hebrews, however, reads that they disobeyed even though for 40 years they saw what I did. That is why I was angry with that generation. Now, did you catch the difference? It's a subtle change, but it's significant. He switches the idea from being punished for 40 years after an indefinite amount of seeing God at work to seeing God work for 40 years and then an indefinite amount of punishment. Now, the author of Hebrews is trying to tie together Jesus and Moses, and 40 years of seeing God and then a decision about whether they will follow or not aligns a lot better with the early church than seeing God and then 40 years of punishment. After all, they had just had God among them for 30 plus years, and now the early church had to make a decision of whether they would be faithful and follow or not. Now, at first glance, this could be just a simple grammatical error. After all, there wasn't any punctuation in the original text, so it would have been fairly easy to mistakenly flip where the 40 years belongs. The problem with that is that in verse 17, the author cites it correctly, asking, with whom was he, God, angry for 40 years? The author knew what the original said. He knew that the 40 years was associated with punishment and not with viewing God at work, and he chose to change the wording to better fit his point. I don't know of any other explanation that is still honest to what the text says. The author of Hebrews knowingly changed scripture to make it better fit his point. The question is, what do we do about it? Well, there are a variety of options. We can simply say that the author was inspired and so could do no wrong, and we just ignore it. I don't find that helpful, but I understand the closure that it gives some people. We can just throw out the entire book of Hebrews because he misquoted something, but I don't find that particularly helpful either. We wouldn't throw out anything else for one mistake. We don't ignore the news the first time a fact is slanted or toss out a favorite book because they did something like this. So why would we abandon something that has been proven to be so powerful, so helpful as the book of Hebrews? I find helpfulness and truth, as is often the case, somewhere in the middle. At the time Hebrews was written, the Bible was seen as slightly more fluid, and so interpretations and applications could be wider without causing offense. That the Bible was seen more malleable than it is today, open to new interpretations and applications. What he did is a disappointment to me, but it's not a deal breaker because it falls inside the realms of normality. And at least the author of Hebrews was citing scripture, unlike all of the examples we'll be dealing with next week, where they're alluding or quoting things that are way outside of the Bible. That'll do it for this week. A special shout out to Peter Enns and his book, Inspiration and Incarnation, which originally put me on to this passage of scripture, something that I'd completely missed in my own studies. As always, thank you for watching. Have a great week. I'll see you next Friday.